Welcome to Tech Career Podcast. Creating valuable and relevant content to encourage, motivate, and empower you to achieve your career goals. Microsoft has a long history of valuable certifications, and for many, these certifications have been a powerful resource to help them get better jobs, promotions, and show that they have real technical expertise in a particular area. In the recent years, we have seen a shift on these certifications. This is all happening with the introduction of the cloud. Now it's not just about Windows or servers, but the focus has shifted to a more relevant topic like the Azure cloud. There are many options available, so how do you decide which certification path to take? To help us understand this, we have a very special guest today. His name is Lars Klint. Lars is an Azure instructor with a cloud guru. He is also an author of various publications, a trainer of cloud computing, Microsoft MVP, community leader, an aspiring Microsoft Azure expert, and part-time classic car collector. Lars, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Christian. No, thanks for having me here. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about that we're going to discuss today. So this will be good. And there may even be llamas, just saying.
Yeah, okay. I love it. I hope so. That'll be fun. Now, for the audience, in this episode, we will take a general view about Microsoft certifications. In future episodes, we will focus on a specific certification, and then we'll explore that topic in detail. Let's talk about cloud. The introduction of cloud computing revolutionized many things, not just from the technology perspective, but also from the cultural perspective. Many organizations adopted a new way of developing software, for example, and they changed the way they were going about that. Now, there has been a big adoption happening, for many organizations in the cloud, and this also changed the needs and the requirements for many technical jobs. But why don't you help us understand the cloud? What is it, and why is it so important to stay relevant with these skills?
Sure. We can't do this in even an hour, I think, but we can do it briefly for sure. The cloud it's one of those things that you sort of didn't know you need until it was there. We were very happy developing applications. I'm a software developer as a background as well. And I was developing applications for industry, for, large corporate clients, for smaller companies. And it was really good. It was, we put it on the web, it might be a website, but there was always this thing of not my words, but what's called yak shaving. And it's when, I'm not sure who coined the term, but yak shaving is when you have to do all those little things to get to the thing you really want to do. So for a software developer, they could be like, oh, I got to set up the database now, and I got to set up this VM so I can host it somewhere. I got to set up IIS or a web server, yada, yada, yada. It just goes on and on and on. And with cloud, so first AWS and then Azure in particular, was this sort of revelation of, oh, I don't have to do any of that. It wasn't so much that it was like up in the cloud. Cloud is just a popular term for a data center because it's somewhere else. But it was this idea of I can do much more of the thing I love without having to do all of the boring stuff. And that for me as a developer was really the turning point. So I started using Azure in about 2011, 2012, something like that, from memory. And there was not much there. You could rent a VM if you wanted to. There was what called web roles and worker roles, and that was almost it. It was very simple, but it gave that hint of power that you wanted. So that's sort of where it started. And we've had data centers for ages, but we've never had a company that took a large amount of computing power and data centers and sort of made it available. We've always had data centers that would host your own hardware or would maybe lend you hardware, but you had to do everything else. So it's this new concept of I can click a button and I get computing power. That's amazing. So that is sort of where it started. So now cloud today, we've kept the term, but cloud means so much more. Like we have cloud computing as a term, and people go, oh, I want to learn cloud computing. And it's like, okay, but which of the 100 different ways of cloud computing do you want to learn, right? So it's become very large. And it provides almost every solution there is for companies to create software and applications and services online. Because face it, most of the stuff we do is online. It's very hard to work without internet today in tech. So that's sort of to summarize that, cloud is someone else's computer in a data center on a hosted platform, basically, right? That make sense?
No, it makes sense. And it's interesting that you said how it started and where it is today. It seems like the cloud itself evolved, right? It had an evolution of added features and capabilities. I mean, the cloud was the very early cloud is very different than the cloud that we have today. I mean, the enhancement that they added, right? So I think probably getting a certification or skills within that, you have to continuously evolve as well and learn and relearn, right?
Oh yeah, you can't. You have to keep your skills up to date, and it's not just technology. I mean, I think you probably have to do that in any business. Say if you are, if you own a store, a brick and mortar type store that you sell clothes. Well, it's not the same way you sell clothes now as you did 10 years ago. Now you need people to be on your newsletters or have your app or, try it on before they even get there or whatever it is. Like everything's evolving, and cloud is no different. It's just that cloud probably moved a little bit faster than most things, I would imagine. And we see this in certifications as well, because so I did one course, I believe you took, Christian, as well, which is the fundamentals of Azure, the AZ900.
That's right.
And that, from when I did that course, it's changed 3 times, like major changes to it, right? So that never changes. And it's as a course creator, you go, oh man, again, right? Because you have to update everything, and and you, as a course creator, we don't have any insights into how that works within Microsoft. We don't know, so we know at the same time as you do, and we go, ooh, wow, okay, we've got to get to it now. And then the students go, yeah, but it's not up to date. I'm like, yeah, give us a minute. Hang on, right? Because there's a process to go through. So yeah, it absolutely changes all the time. And if you don't keep up with your certifications, well, you're going to sort of fall behind. And we can talk about certifications as well, but there's a reason they're structured the way they are.
That's true. Microsoft has been a big name for many valuable certifications. In fact, I have some of those certifications myself, and I remember early in my career working very hard to get one of those focused on the server side, like the MCSA or MCSC, right? It was very interesting to see Microsoft evolve as well, and become a more open organization. Something that, to be quite honest, not many of us expected to see. This evolution took them to adapt quickly to the competition. I feel that Microsoft was able to build a very powerful cloud platform. Now, this evolution also changed the options available for their certifications, but there seems to be so many different paths that one can take, right? So it can be hard to choose and to decide. Could you help us understand the different paths that are currently available for these certifications, and how do you choose?
Sure. So I mean, I can speak to Microsoft and Azure in particular because that's sort of my bag. But it's similar for if you want to do AWS or GCP or any other cloud platform. But in Azure, it's called role based. So it's sort of you decide, well, what type of role do I want to more than the skills as such. So you say, okay, well, I don't know anything about cloud. I'm going to start with the fundamentals, and that's the same for everybody. So that's the learning the terminology and all of the broad range of services and how some of the things might work together, but at a very high level. You don't get any in-depth knowledge, but you get an idea of what exists. You get an idea of how cloud can benefit in a lot of ways without necessarily knowing the in-depth thing. But hopefully from that, you'll have an idea of like, oh, I really like administering infrastructure. So, I might go down the Azure administrator route, or, hey, I like developing applications. So maybe it's Azure developer, or I really think data is amazing. Like, how do you manage all that data and big data and data warehousing and data manipulation? And how do I make, 16 different data formats work in the same way in the end, et cetera, et cetera. Like, then you go down the data path, data engineer. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can specialize within cloud, and you're going to have to. It's very difficult to be a generalist within cloud, as it is within any tech. But it's a little bit easier if you are a sort of generic software developer, for lack of a better term, is that you can know a lot about many things, and you can have skills, and you can be able to. I can build your websites, or I can build you a mobile app, or I can build you an infrastructure API, or whatever it might be. And you have this broad skill set. Whereas in cloud, it tends to be a little bit more: I'm a developer, or I'm a network administrator, or I'm a security expert, or I'm a DevOps. You have those paths, and it's quite confusing at first, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I created a video with ACG, with A Cloud Guru, about the different paths in Azure. So it's like the Azure certification guide, I think it's called. But I'm sure we can link to that in the show as well. And
Definitely.
that sort of just cemented it for a lot of people, because I personally disagree with the way that Microsoft says you should do them, like the order of things, because it's like, no, you can't go from that to that because you're missing the middle part. So that's where I'm trying to sort of educate in like my subjective way of saying, hey, I think you should do it this way. And here are the benefits and here's the why. So yeah, there are definitely guides you can use to figure out which path to do, but there's no substitute for actually doing it. So if you think a path is right for you, well, go do that. If you halfway through you find out, oh God, this is not what I thought it was, well, rewind, try another way, right? Because we can't know everything from the start. So it's totally fine to change your mind. No problem there. But you're going to have to choose a path, I think, to sort of get real value out of the cloud. You can't know everything.
There's a few things that I want to touch on here. The first, my background was always on the infrastructure side, right? I think as an infrastructure guy, that if I was a system administrator managing an infrastructure, I think the cloud would have scared me a little bit, just because I would be concerned about my job, right? I mean, I guess initially many of them were.
Yep.
Many probably were that way when the cloud was introduced. But I think you mentioned something very important. Within the cloud, there is space for infrastructure people. There is space for those networking people, for those developers, right? I mean, there's still a very big need for these kind of skills and backgrounds.
So you touched on an interesting point with and I get this question time and time again. It's like, but I've already got this massive skill set. I already know how to build a .NET application for Windows. I already know how to build a Python integration with something, right? Well, why do I, like, how is this going to impact me, essentially? People are, as you said, scared I'm going to, have to be out of a job. And that'll just never happen. Like, if you're scared about being out of a job, well, you have other issues, I think, rather than just the cloud, right? There's other things we need to address first. Because it's, I mentioned this before, you have to keep up. And it's, if you don't want to learn the new things, why are you in this industry, right?
Yeah,
we change all the time. So cloud is just the next thing. And in 10 years, there's going to be another thing. And cloud is going to be like just the thing that everybody does. That's just a part of the toolbox, right? It's not that special or anything. There'll be another thing, quantum, whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
So we have to keep up. And if you're in infrastructure, well, right now it's like, why would you not want to learn, say, Terraform? That's or Bicep for Azure. Like, it's really exciting to have interest in how can you make your job more efficient, more accurate, more more valuable. That's really the thought process that I think people should have, rather than, oh no, a new thing I have to learn. Because if you're scared of that, you're in the wrong business. Like, you need to find something where you want to learn the next thing.
I think in technology, things evolve so quickly and change so quickly that you have to keep up to stay relevant, right? I think, as you mentioned, and you know what, it goes to any industry, really. If you want to be a relevant and valuable employee, you have to keep up with your skills. I mean, you can just think that the successes of the past are going to take you to the future and going to be the same successes in the future if you don't get ready, if you don't prepare yourself, right?
Absolutely. And it's this old fallacy. There's no such thing as a secure job, right?
Yeah.
We see this in tech currently. We had 2-3 years of people, you couldn't get enough tech people. And now lots of companies are sort of going, oh, we probably had too many. And now they're scaling down again, right? So there's no such thing as a secure job. All you can do is look after yourself and make sure you have a skill set that you enjoy and that has some value, right? And cloud is just right up there. Like, it's massively valuable.
That's a really good point. Yeah, and to be able to stay, really in that desirable state, of an employee, and people wanting to recruit you and get you jobs, right? I think getting a certification is part of that. It makes you more marketable, right?
It does.
Now,
Yeah.
as we talk about the different paths, once you decide on a path for a cloud Microsoft certification, what are the options available on how someone can study to be able to pass this exams?
Sure. So that's an important part of it, right? Because it's the words are easy. Oh, I'm going to get this exam, or I'm going to get this certification, right? And then you have to actually do it. And there are many different ways in which people prefer to learn. There's never a one size fits all. Some people like to read a book, a physical book. Some people like to read blog posts. Some people like video content. Some people like hands-on, so they're like, no, I just got to do it. Just tell me what to, I'll figure it out. Okay? There's so many different ways that you learn, not you, but the general you, that you have to find the way that's right for you. And obviously, plug. I work for Pluralsight/ACG, and this is what we do, right? We provide training. So go check that out if you like video content and blog content. But maybe it's you want to go to a conference and do a workshop. It depends on what options you have available. There are tons of free resources. Like ACG has a free tier that's always free that we provide, rotating courses. There's tons of YouTube content with varying degree of quality, I should say. Yeah. Some of it is a bit interesting, but in general, you can find stuff. And it's the only excuse is that you can't be bothered, right? There's really no excuse. So find the way that you prefer to learn. And then the second part of that is that, and I would say 95% of people need this. You need someone to hold you accountable, right? You need someone that says, well, are you done yet? Well, where are you at now? Have you done that? Because otherwise it becomes one of those things that go, oh, I can just do it tomorrow, right? It'll be fine, right? You need that accountability, and that comes in different ways as well. It might be that you find a Discord server. And again, Pluralsight has a Discord server. That's just what comes to mind. It might be you have a study group at work, like a lunch group. So every Wednesday for an hour, you meet up and you talk through what you're learning and what might be a problem. It could be that you comment on YouTube or you go on Twitter and ask. Like, find a way that works for you, because you need that accountability. And I say 95% because there's always that little niche that just goes, nah, I'll just do it on my own. And that's fine too, if that works for you. But yeah, there's those two parts of it. Find the way that you learn, and then find some way that you're held accountable. How do you actually meet those deadlines or those goals so that you get through it? Because we're not in high school, right? No one cares if you do it or not. It's all up to you.
That's true. That's really good advice. I think I remember when I was getting my first certifications, it was very early in my career, just because I wanted to prove to myself and to the employers that didn't know my job history, because I didn't have any job history, right? To get a job, right? And so, as I was studying for the certifications, the first thing I would do, I would go to the specific organization that I was trying to get certified in and look at the requirements. What's going to be in the exam. What are the general topics and subjects that are going to be covered. From there, then, as you mentioned, there's a lot of really good free resources. But I also get what you pay for sometimes, right? So sometimes if you pay for a resource, you're gonna get maybe more tailored or more specific or a different way of delivering that training. And that's my experience. There's a lot of great free resources that are gonna maybe take you a little bit more time to digest and to be able to understand. But when you pay for a training, it becomes a little maybe easier to be able to do that. Now, let me tell you what I did for that certification that we just discussed. Sure. Of the Azure fundamentals, right? And this is, I think I want to share these for the audience to see so they understand kind of the process that I took, but it could be a different process for them, right? But my process was I went to a cloud guru and actually created an account there. And I realized that there was a free course. I could not believe it that this company provided a free course, right? And to my surprise, I was like, okay, well, let me take it, right? And I took that free course, and I was like, man, this is amazing. This is really good, and I loved it. And in fact, you were the instructor of that certificate of that
All
course.
right, I'll give you the $20. Jeez, okay.
No, and and that's one thing that I was saying that that it made it so fun, so much fun. It was entertaining, it was fun, but it was very easy to digest. Right now, that's one way for me to learn. But I know friends that they like reading instead. They like getting the book, like you mentioned, and read, and that's how they learn. So I think getting to know yourself, getting to know how you learn is so important to be able to capture the information that's going to be required for you to take the exam. Now, I also watched other videos to kind of complement, and have different views and different perspectives, right, on the certification, and did some labs and hands-on. The one interesting thing that I want to share here too, there are many that are working for technical companies that require them certifications, and maybe companies that are not a technical company, but you're in the technical group. There are options available for your employer to pay for the exam a lot of the times. I work for many organizations where I would, schedule the exam, I will pay out of pocket, then I will pass it, and my company will reimburse me for that. Some organizations will also reimburse me for the training, right? And sometimes organizations will provide you that training as well, right? So I think that's important to mention.
I agree, and it's a good story because it's, you're not unique. There's a lot of people that go through that sort of, oh wow, okay, I like this bit, I don't like that bit. You figure out how you learn. A couple of things I just want to mention is that when you pay for a service, whether it's ACG Pro, like something else, it doesn't matter. When you pay for something, it gives you value. Sorry, let me rephrase that. When you pay for a service, you attribute value to it, right? So if they give you something for free, okay, hey, Christian, here is a free widget. You go, oh, that's cool, that's really nice, and you put it in the cupboard, right? If you go out and you pay $100 for that widget, you go, I'm going to find a use for it. Right? So when you pay for something, you attribute value to it. And I think that's really important. Don't just say, well, I can't afford it. Because affordability is often a choice, especially at this level. We're talking 30, 40, $50 maybe, right? If you can't find that, if you can't skip 8 coffees a month to learn a new skill, well, you got to sort your priorities right. And then suddenly if you have to give something else up, well, you're attributing value to something, you go, well, I probably actually want to really do this. Right. So there's real value in paying for it, both psychologically, but also, as you said, you might get better quality content. Absolutely. And then the other thing let's see if I can remember what you said. When you mentioned that, how you learn, often it's not just the medium. It's also if you can connect with the person that's teaching it, right? So you might have a favorite author of books. Well, continue doing that. You might have someone that presents something on YouTube in a way that you find enticing, engaging, amusing, whatever it is that keeps you on. Then keep using that, right? So you got to find the right people as well. And that's in any walk of life, really. Find the people that makes your journey better and easier and more successful. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that before we moved on.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. And it's interesting because another thing that I did early in my career was invest in a lab, right? So I bought a couple of servers that I have here at home and a managed switch and all this other stuff that I started buying and buying and buying. And it was probably one of the best investments for my career that I've done because for my kind of learning, I am pretty hands-on. So I need to constantly have and rebuild my servers, and install VMs, install servers, and break them, and that, because that's how I learn, right? And so the other thing that the course, the paid course gives you on Cloud Guru, and again, this is not a paid advertisement or anything like that. It's just something that I experienced and that I want to share with the audience. This was a lot of fun and it was very helpful, right, for me. So I want to share with others. Was those labs that you guys provide, right? The platform provides. That's something that not many courses do, and it's something very beneficial for me that I'm very hands-on, right? So you get the visual aspect of it, the audible aspect of it, and then the hands-on aspect of it.
Yeah,
hands-on is pretty important, especially nowadays, right? With these certifications, it seems like there's a lot more hands-on that are required for some of these certifications.
It is, and that's why we did those, to be honest. So I wasn't involved in actually building out the labs, but I've seen and heard stories, and they're extraordinarily complex to do. But that's in order so it's easy for you. And the cool thing is that you just go there and you press all the buttons. If it breaks, you just shut it down and start it up again, and it's all there, right? You can't actually break anything, and there's no $2,000 bill at the end of the month or anything like that. So you're sort of safe, and it's a safe space for breaking things. And then some of the challenge, I mean, we're talking specifically about labs, but some of my colleagues have made like labs where they go, okay, here's what you need to do. And they give you like a minute overview, and then you go, all right, I'm going to try that. Then if you get stuck, you keep playing the video, and it gives you a few pointers like, oh, you got to do this and use this service and start here. And if you're still stuck, right at the end, there's the whole walkthrough of it, right? So you get this sort of still hand-holding without, only if you want it. And it works for so many people, and I'm genuinely proud of that sandbox environment.
I experienced that.
It just works.
It does. It really does. I'm actually also right now studying because of course I passed that certification, and so I have the Azure fundamentals now, right? But now I'm studying for the EX 180, which is a Red Hat certification, right? I work at Red Hat, and I want to get that certification as well. And that's focused more on the OpenShift and Kubernetes containers kind of topic. And now I have a full subscription, a Cloud Guru, and I was going through the labs, and it's so true what you said. The many of the labs I've been trying to do on my own, right? And then I get stuck. I'm like, oh wait, what was the command? What was I supposed to do here? And this platform still provides you with those kind of instructions on how to do it as well. So it's very helpful because as you practice, you get more comfortable. You remember the commands, and then you have some of that guidance to help you with that. So I think the important thing to mention here is that to know, as you mentioned, Clint, to know how you study. Lars, I'm sorry, I say Clint. Lars, how you learn, right? And then find that author or teacher who teaches in that way that is very that you're able to learn from.
Yeah.
Now, when let's say I'm studying and I feel ready, right, for the exam now. So what should I do prior to taking the exam? And I want to talk about this because many of us feel very nervous before taking the exam. And I feel that many of us may feel that we're not ready, right? And so you may push the exam, and we may keep pushing. I don't think you're ever going to feel ready for the exam, right?
That's the secret. You're not. Let me just I'm just going to step one step back first. Because we were talking about how do you study and how do you, motivate yourself. One of the really powerful things is just to book the damn exam. Because once you have a date, it's like, oh boy, I've got 6 weeks and I got to learn all this. And it gives you, for most people, not everybody, but for most people, it gives you that kick up the back that really makes you figure out how to study in time for it, right? So that's just one thing. But when the day, approaches, feeling nervous is a good thing. I've always said that. If I'm speaking in front of 400 people or 1,000 people or 50 people, I'm still nervous before I need to present my talk. But I'm like, well, the day I'm not, I probably don't care anymore, right? So I take nervousness is like because you really want it. You really care. If you're speaking in front of an audience, it's like you really want to make them have a good experience and make sure that you get your point across and you show the things you have planned. With an exam, you're nervous because you really want to pass it, of course, but you also probably see the benefits of passing it, and you feel you've studied a lot, and you're like you almost deserve. I hope you feel you deserve it. So nervousness is fine. Embrace it. I think that's a good thing. It just means that you're human and you care about something. So when that day comes, the way that you I'll start from the day like the night before. Don't ever cram on the night before, right? It makes no difference. It's not going to do you any good. Now, I've done it, absolutely. I think most people have taken an exam and sat there the night before. But I've learned that it's just, you just fill your head with all these things, and none of it is because you've learned that you're trying to cram facts in, and it doesn't work. Instead, what you need to focus on is focus on the concepts, right? So when you learn to drive a car, you're not worrying about how how the cylinders, what the firing order is of the cylinders, right? It doesn't matter. What you're worrying about is the road rules and how do I find a petrol station, gas station in the US? How do I change a tire? How do I fix things? You want to learn those things around the vehicle. And it's a bit the same with cloud computing. Is that you don't need to know what size VMs there are. You don't need to know what an API call is, especially not for fundamentals, right? Some of the exams you do need to know a few API calls, but in general, you need to know the concepts. Okay, what does it mean if I want to create this particular application? Or what does it mean if someone says you need to use IaaS or SaaS? Or understand those concepts, right? So the courses usually tell you a bunch of theory and then a bunch of hands-on. And it's a way of trying to make you remember the theory by having something you did, right? Because there's a real connection between your hands and your brain. So when you do something hands-on or you see something that's hands-on, well, that usually connects better to the concept that you're trying to learn, right? That's why we hear this often, like, oh, school, I learned about Pythagoras. I'm never using it. Why did I ever learn that, right? But it's a way that you're teaching your brain to understand concepts. It's not that you need Pythagoras' theorem because you're in cloud computing. It's because you need to learn how to learn. You need to learn the concepts around something. And it's the same here. Try and figure out what the concepts are. So that if someone will ask you, hey, can you explain SaaS to me? You can without having to go into details. Or if someone says, I'm just trying to think of AZ 900, the fundamentals course, if someone asked you, what is Azure Storage? What does it do? Right? Try and explain it. But also, of course, know what it does, but try and explain the concept of Azure Storage rather than knowing that, when I need to create a blob container, I can do it with a blob anonymity or I can do it publicly. Like it becomes if you know the concept, then that detailed information you can usually deduct. That makes sense?
It does.
What I'm getting at is you don't have to learn 100%. You have to learn the concepts and enough information so that you can, reason your way through anything that you might not know.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's true. I mean, you see that in the exams because there are questions that get you right. Sometimes the answers look very similar, but I think if you really understand the concept itself, it starts making more and more sense. The more you read the question, the more you look at the answers. Like, well, this answer looks a lot more like the right answer,
That's
because
right.
I understand the concept. The one thing that's interesting about the Microsoft certifications versus others, I actually started studying for the AWS certification. They also have like some sort of fundamentals, right, exam.
Yep.
And because I have been studying for the Microsoft certifications my whole career, I am familiar with how Microsoft does their certifications, right? And asks their questions, and I'm very familiar and very comfortable. The one thing that I noticed about the Microsoft certification was that their concepts made a lot more sense. The naming convention made a lot more sense. I feel that the AWS, for example, were like names that I was like, well, doesn't make sense. I mean, it doesn't relate to the action it's taking, So I was having a real hard time understanding the concepts in the general concept.
Yeah.
I switched to Microsoft certification studying, and I was like, oh, okay, now I got it. This makes sense. This makes sense. So I felt more comfortable with that.
It is one of my interesting, not interesting, but I bring it up in talks, right? Because I do so much Azure and I'm Azure MVP, etc. I find it interesting that the AWS naming is so different. There's very few things in AWS that make any sense if you don't know it already. So that they have Elastic Beanstalk, right, or they have S3 or whatever it might be, right? And you go, what is that? Right. But I think it's the same way the other way. If you know everything about AWS, you go, so okay, VM I get. What's Cosmos DB again? Right, there are certainly goes both ways, but it's interesting. It's the platforms are trying to differentiate themselves in different ways. I just like Azure because they call it what it is.
Yeah, no, and I think that's another part of choosing the right certification. I think especially if you're starting to get certifications or starting to get certifications in the cloud in particular, there's nothing wrong with pivoting. Maybe you're studying for one certification, it's just not it's just not clicking, with you. And this is exactly what happened to me, right? I was studying for the AWS certification. I was having a hard time, and I pivot and I say, you know what? I'm going to go with what I know I'm familiar with for now. And then eventually I'm going to go ahead and get AWS one. But right now I want to focus on what I'm comfortable and familiar with. And it just made it a lot easier, more enjoyable. And now that I understand the concepts of the cloud, I think now going back and studying for AWS will make a lot more sense, right? Because it's very similar concepts.
Yeah, and I was going to say, don't get too comfortable though.
Yeah, true.
No, you're right. You got to find a grounding point. That's why in the particular course that you're talking about, the AZ900, I try to explain cloud concepts using things we know every day, right? So, using a bowls of sweets or lollies to explain, different blob containers or whatever it was. I can't remember now off the top of my head. Using, Lego cars to explain IoT to make it more relatable. And it's what you're saying is like, once I know the concepts in one cloud, it's easier to transfer it. And it absolutely is.
Yeah, definitely. Now I studied for the certification. So how about the day of the exam, right? I think for many people, again, if you've taken the certifications before, then this is a no-brainer. But people that are starting to take these exams can be challenging, especially nowadays that you have the ability to take an exam from your house, right, in your computer. And I will explore that here in a little bit as well, kind of all the technicalities that go with that, but also going to a location to take the exam. What would you recommend for those people that are, taking the exams, the day of the exam?
Yeah, so you said there's two different ways of doing it, and they are different. One is you go to an exam center, and you sit in a room, and you have nothing with you. So both cases you have nothing, right? So if I do it here, so I'm talking to you, I can see you on the screen. I have 3 screens, and there's a camera, and there's lights and everything, right? And it's all lovely. For an exam, none of that, right? You have one screen, keyboard, mouse, that's it. Nothing else. Oh, and a webcam because they have to be able to see you. And it's because they want to replicate how it is in an exam center or an exam destination. So whatever you feel comfortable with. If you have a space at home where you can clear everything off a desk and you can sit with nothing around you and there's no interruptions, etc., then great. Right, you can absolutely do that. Have a decent internet connection, which I haven't always had. So that's fine. But if you don't want any of that to impact you, then you go to an exam center. There's no difference in price. And when you go there, then they tell you what you can and can't do. Right. And it's sort of managed for you. So the experience of this is the same in that sense. It's a set exam on a screen and you go through it. There's no difference with that. So whatever you feel comfortable with. I've done both. But it's I wouldn't say it's intimidating. If you haven't done it before, sure, it's unfamiliar. But there's nothing there. There's, other than the screen and you, and that's it. It's a bit like sitting at midnight looking at a YouTube video, right? It's just you and the screen, right? So in that sense, it's not. It's all the pressure that you put on yourself for whatever reason. Maybe it's from the work, maybe it's yourself, whatever it might be. I would say that you can't do anything on the day, right? You're done. Now that's easier said than done because some people will really get themselves going and rile themselves and go, I don't know anything, I don't know enough, or I'll keep going, and then it all deteriorates from there. And that's unfortunate. Then you need to work on that side of things. But there's nothing more you can do. So try and be as relaxed as you can. Go to your favorite coffee shop. Make sure you don't drink too much water because you're not allowed to use the toilet. And some of these exams are 2.5, 3 hours long, right? So there are certain things with that, especially the proctored one from home. If they can't see you on the camera, if you leave the camera, you fail. As simple as that. Done. Right. So that's just how it is. They will not allow any sort of cheating, which I am 100% behind. Because that makes it negates it for everybody. So and then one of the things I've learned is accept that you might fail. You know what? It's totally fine. It's just fine. It doesn't matter. It's a bit like, not that I've ever smoked, but if you're trying to quit smoking, you might not succeed the first time. You fall back on, and start smoking. But then you try again and you do it again. And eventually you will succeed, right? If you want it bad enough. And it's the same with these, with cloud or any exams, but let's talk about cloud exams, cloud certification, is that if you really want it, it's fine that you fail the first time. If anything, you know what's going to happen. You know there's, the room and the process and everything, and you don't have to worry. You don't have to spend mental energy on that. And if you pass the first time, awesome. That's cool too. But there's no no one looks down on you because you failed the damn certification exam. It's just fine. You just try again. So try and just be as relaxed as you can, however possible that is. You definitely want to be as relaxed as you can, have your mental, get a good night's sleep. I mean, it sounds really corny and cliche, but it's so important. But because you want to make sure that you see something, a scenario on the screen, you go, oh yeah, I think I know what that is, rather than going, oh, I think I knew. Oh, and you rack your brain and you're tired and you need a coffee. It's be as refreshed as you can. And most employers, as you said, will facilitate this for you because it's in their interest. Of course, they want you to certify.
That's true. That day of the exam, I've known people that are trying to study, and I think it does more harm than good, because then what I feel it happens is you're so nervous about it that now all the information that you're trying to read and learn now is gonna scramble up. Everything that now is like, wait, was it this? Was it that? Now you're all confused. Like, I feel you need to trust yourself, trust the work that you did, the information that you learned, and what you've learned so far up until that point. Trust it, trust it and just go with it. And like Lars said, you may fail, but you know what? At least you tried, right? I mean, now you know what to expect in the future. And so you feel a little more comfortable for the next time. And, it may even help you better because now you understand things a lot better. You have a different perspective and experience. You can't buy experience. You can't learn, or just have experience by nature. You have to go through it, right?
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's you can't learn the entire topic the night before. If you haven't spent usually about 3 months, it's usually the period of time, but 3 to 6 months or something. If you don't do that and do it regularly, well, you're not going to get into the rhythm of learning that skill or that topic. You can't do it the night before.
That's true. Now let's go and talk about, now I have passed the first exam, right? And I obtained a certification. I'm very excited. I finally passed it. What's next? Is there anything else that I should be looking at? Is there anything else as a student or as a worker that is getting a certification? Now this person has passed the first certification, has a certification. What's next?
It's a extraordinarily broad answer, or it's the short of it is you have to figure that out what's right for you. So there can be some external factors that may push you in a certain direction. If you work for a company that an Azure shop, or they use AWS or whatever, they might have certain skill sets that they want you to learn or want you to focus on, and maybe that is what sort of pushes you down one path. I've spoken to lots of students that went, well, I just needed the fundamentals. I work in sales or marketing, and I just need to understand the language and what it does in general. And you go, oh, that's cool. Fine. That's okay too. If you're a technologist, well, trying to figure that out. So usually for Azure in particular, I would say go with the Azure Administrator, which is AZ 104, or the Azure Developer, which is AZ 204, because those are very broad exams. And speaking of failing, I've failed AZ 104 3 times. I just cannot get past it. but I passed AZ 204 the first time because I'm a developer by nature. I don't understand infrastructure as well. So no, failing is totally fine, right? I am going to get it though.
Yes.
So I would say one of those two. Focus on one of those two. I've had quite a few students that go, okay, I've got Azure Fundamentals. How do I become an architect? And I'm like, why do you want to be an architect again? And it's often, not always, but very often, it's like, oh, that's the highest paid role. Or that sounds the most interesting. I'm like, yeah, you're not going to get to architect in like 6 months. That's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So also have some scope, right? If you want to be an architect, sweet, awesome, but here's the path, right? But right off the bat in Azure, and it's probably the same in AWS, like go down the sysadmin route or the developer route usually. Those tend to be broad enough so you'll find a lot of stuff you do enjoy, maybe not all of it. And then from there you go, oh, actually, I really enjoyed the release pipeline of AZ-104 of the administration. Well, maybe you want to do DevOps then, right? Or I really enjoyed making sure that firewalls and security and stuff. Well, maybe you want to do cloud security. But yeah, those are the sort of two broad ones. Or you might want to go directly into this can get confusing. There's or other fundamental exams in data and in AI as well. So.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah, so that's good. It could be a good way for somebody that hasn't really decided the path they want to take to understand the different paths. Maybe you go with those fundamentals on the different areas, and then you realize, you know what? I didn't really like the data. I like the infrastructure. Or I didn't like the infrastructure, but I like data. And so I think it's a good way for you to understand at least the general the general aspects of that particular area. And then from there, choose. Because as you mentioned, Lars, I think it's important for somebody to specialize in an area. Generalist is a great thing to know. I love being a generalist. I don't like being a specialist, in all honesty. I love strategy. I love understanding the big picture and putting things together. But I think when it comes to the cloud, you can become a lot more valuable if you are able to understand and become really good and skilled in a specific area, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
It is tricky because we no shoe fits all, right? And one size doesn't fit all. So it really is a very subjective thing of what you like to learn. And maybe you find actually that cloud isn't for you and you want to go down, say, the Linux path, right? Or you want to do some security certificates or whatever. But it's you got to try out things of what you find interesting. And often a lot of it is, if you have let me just try that again. If you have no experience in computing or cloud, you go, well, I want a cloud certificate so I can get a job. I'm sorry, that's not how it works, right? It's not. The cloud certificate or any certification is part of your CV. It's part of your toolbox. It does not give you a job. No one's going to go, hey, you got AZ-900, Azure Fundamentals? Yeah, of course we're going to give you a job. The world doesn't work that way. What it does mean is that if you have a skill set and another applicant has the same skill set and you have certifications, for example, well, you stand out more, right? It gives you that added. But you should do it for you. Like I do certifications, so I'm like, okay, now I know something about this topic and I understand the vast area or subjects that are within it. It shouldn't be, I want to get a job. Right? Of course we want to get a job, we got to eat. But don't make that the reason, I don't think, because then you're going to keep changing. Like, oh, that sounds good too. Or that over there sounds good too. And you keep changing your mind, right? Rather go for what you think is interesting. And having, because it is a question that comes up quite a bit, is like, which certificate should I get to get this job? I'm like, no, I can't answer that. Well, you don't. You're not going to. But if you're already in a job, for example, and say you're on a team of 10 people and 6 of them have a particular cloud certification because you work in that field, it's probably a good idea to get it, right? You can talk the same language, you know the same things. The manager of that team will know that this team is on the same page. Like there's real value other than just, hey, I want a job, right? It's certifications is more of it's one of the pieces. It's not the piece.
That's good. That's good advice. And it's true, especially early in your career, you think that a certification is almost automatic job security, and job that I'm going to get. And that was me, honestly. I mean, during college, I knew how to get a job in the field if I wanted to succeed, right? And so I was going to college full-time and working full-time in the field because I didn't have experience prior to college. And then I wanted to be a sysadmin, right? Because I was a help desk guy. And so I started studying for Microsoft certification, also VMware certification. And I thought, well, once I get this certification, I'm for sure going to get a job. but it's not that easy, because you really have to also have all these other pieces. Now, as you mentioned, it's gonna make you stand out versus other candidates. That is for sure, because it shows commitment. It shows that you went through and were able to learn, a topic, and were able to
Absolutely.
put in the work. So it's definitely gonna make you stand out,
Yep.
versus other candidates that perhaps don't have that certification.
Yeah. I mean, put it this way. If I was hiring someone, not that I am, but I would always put attitude and ambition ahead of any exam, diploma, certificate, anything like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you want it bad enough, you're going to learn what's needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather put that. And having said that, one of the absolute best ways that you can stand out and show that you are really keen is have some sort of side project. Right. And it's always, I don't want this to be the mantra that, in work tech, you must have a side project. That's not what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have something you're passionate about, it could be a blog, it could be a GitHub repo, it could be a YouTube channel, it could be, God knows what, right? Whatever it is that you think is cool and you start talking about it, well, it's going to bubble up. Because the first thing employers are going to do is going to Google you. They're going to see where you are, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
without a doubt. So if you have something that you can sort of go, hey, yeah, I built this, and this is why. This is really cool. I help solve this, colorblind problem, or I help, whatever the thing is that you think is very cool. Well, that's going to stand out, and you can show that you're keen, you're excited about it, right? And I
That's
would
true.
have that any day over a certificate or diploma or anything.
Podcasts on tech careers, and things like
Yeah,
that, right?
exactly.
uh, Lars, well, thank you so much for that. That has been very, very beneficial, personally, but also I think it's going to be very helpful for the audience. But before we leave here, I wanted to see if you have anything you want to share with us, any cool project that you're working on, or anything that you wanted to share with us, your website, or I know you do speaking
Sure.
engagements as well. How can people reach out and get a hold of you?
Yeah, I am really rubbish at sitting still. I just don't do it well. So I do a whole bunch of stuff. I have a YouTube channel that I find
Oh.
great. So this is just my name, Lars Klint. Lars Klint Tech, I think it is. But and it has nothing to do with cloud computing because that's my day job, right? So I work for
Uh-huh.
Pluralsight. I do, I don't just do cloud content, but I'm sort of, skewed that way. But my YouTube channel is all about home automation and networking and Lego.
How cool
And
is that?
yeah, it's great fun, and I get to do it my way, so I can experiment with various different ways of camera work and editing and all sorts. So that's kind of fun. I'm writing a book on Azure actually at the moment,
Wow.
which is out in so it's for Manning Publishing. It's called MEAP, MEAP, Manning Early Access Program, and so you can buy it if you want. I'm writing chapter 8 right now. So
Mhm.
hopefully it'll be done in the next 6 months. I am not a fast writer, so it's taken me forever, but it's getting there. So I'm doing that. I'm very active on Twitter, probably a bit too much. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can go ahead and do that. And then I speak at a whole bunch of places. Last year got a bit mad. I spoke in like 8 different countries in 8 months. Um,
Wow.
Probably not going to do that in 2023, but I will be, especially in Australia, New Zealand, be around for various events and whatnot. But yeah, all those things and a lot more. And there's llamas. If you follow me on Twitter, I
Llamas.
do post pictures. I live on a farm. I probably should have said this at the top of the show, but anyway, for whoever who's left listening, here's the bonus content.
There you go.
I live on a farm in the middle of Australia, right? So I live in the middle of nowhere, and we have llamas. They're neighbors' llamas. I don't do anything with farming. I have no idea what to do. But a neighbor puts his llamas on our farm, and I take pictures and videos of them and put them on the internet.
That's
So much so
awesome.
that I created a llamacam.com.au, which isn't running right now because the llamas are in a paddock where there's no cameras. um, but I did, and it was just one of my projects. Hey, let's try and figure out this Azure media streaming by putting llamas on the internet. Right? So that's one of my things as well. I do like that. So which is why I have a YouTube channel, because there's always something to do here, and I've covered 30 acres in Wi-Fi so far, something like that.
Wow.
So yeah, it's good
And
fun.
and now And now the classes make even more sense because during the course of Azure Fundamentals, you see a lot of llamas there as well mentioned in the labs and such. So that's great. I love it.
Yeah, llamas are hilarious. So yeah, that's it. I have many interests, but yeah, cloud computing, and Lego, and cars are the main ones.
I love it. And for the audience, I'm gonna be Lars. What I usually do, I create a dedicated page for the episode, and I usually share the show notes and such. And so I'm gonna be sharing all these links with all of you, so you guys can have access to Lars' YouTube content, the book that's coming as well, the early purchase program, right? I mean, where you can actually purchase the book, early access.
A book that's not done yet.
Yes, that's awesome. And maybe even access to watch the llamas here in the future as well. So,
they feature in my YouTube videos at times. So
perfect. That's fun. That's awesome. Well, Lars, thank you so much. This has been really fun and helpful. I really appreciate you making the time to speak with us today.
No problem at all, Christian. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Tech Career Podcast. Don't forget to check out our website for more information on how to connect with us by visiting www.techcareerpodcast.com. That's www.techcareerpodcast.com.